In spring 2001, paranormal investigator Montague Keen came across a case that would turn into one of the most intriguing paranormal investigations of its kind.
We came across a lady who had some experience trying for physical phenomena, and she was interested in getting investigated by the Society for Psychical Research, which is a scientific body concerned with objective investigation.
The group claimed that they had witnessed a series of paranormal activities in a house in Ealing, West London. They wanted to prove their claims to a group of independent paranormal investigators. They performed a series of experiments within a controlled environment.
They wanted to see whether they could produce physical phenomena similar to that which they had experienced in another group that I had also investigated, but to do so in conditions which enabled objective and critical scientific observers to be satisfied that there was no possibility of fraud. And she was genuinely enthusiastic about a scientific approach to these phenomena. So they volunteered, this is very unusual, they volunteered to be investigated, and I was doing the preliminary work with my colleagues to see whether the conditions were right.
The experiments were arranged to enable the investigators to discover whether any strange activity was the result of human intervention, or indeed something truly unexplainable.
Clearly, we couldn't lay down conditions that they couldn't comply with, and vice versa. We wanted to have conditions which would be acceptable to us from the point of view of controls against fraud or deception of any sort, so they had to be pretty rigorous. On the other hand, they had to agree what they could do.
The investigators insisted that everyone in the sealed-off room was secured behind a large net curtain to prevent any tampering. However, the previous strange activity in the house had occurred in virtual darkness, and this would have to be replicated if the experiments were to reveal anything. With all conditions in place, Montague Keen didn't have to wait long for the strange activity to begin.
One of the most interesting and exciting things that happened almost at the beginning was that in front of the curtain there was a small table. It's a little pedestal table, only about 2 feet wide, and the table would rise in the air, turn over so that it was the top was facing us, and would greet us by just bending down in front of us one after the other, moving along the row. It was clearly intelligently motivated.
This bizarre event was also witnessed by Veronica Ford, one of several observers present at the experiments.
Well, as soon as the table started responding to me, I thought, my God, this is real. This is not this is not anyone's imagination. This is for real.
After the table had, as it were, greeted us by moving across the row, the table then having been upended in some way, bending itself towards us, it did this gentle dance backwards and forwards in time for the music.
I found that incredible because it was up so high, nobody else could touch it.
The investigators were truly intrigued by the strange movements of the ordinary objects in the sealed-off room. But in near total darkness, the real evidence remained inconclusive. The observers could hear unexplained sounds and make out movements in the dark. They even felt water spraying around them, but couldn't make out the cause of any of the strange events.
Bells were ringing. There were things happening from the moment you sat down. There was something going on all the time.
So what could have been causing these strange occurrences? The investigators had rigged up a special camera to try and capture any unexplainable activity on film.
I think one of the most important, if not the most important, bit of evidence for a paranormal phenomenon was the production of films from one of these fairly cheap instant cameras. This is actually the camera that was used, and the film was loaded new, the camera was new, The lens of the camera was sealed by my colleagues, and we heard the characteristic sound of this being pulled out. I don't want to do it now because this is actually still has in it the cassette that I originally put in. And we know that there was no question of substitution because fortunately these films have on them numbers, each one, and so we pulled out a sample film as a control in order to check that the subsequent film that we found, produced by some form of magic, had the sequel number to it, so that there could be no substitution possible.
To the amazement of the investigating team, the camera revealed a series of strange images that Montague Keen is still trying to explain to this day.
The main question was whether conceivably someone could have got access to the camera in the dark through the netting, and after pulling it out scribbled and scratched around on the top of the film before the gel had done its work. You have about 35 seconds to do this, and produced some sort of image. And fortunately we have one piece of evidence which I think shows conclusively that the picture must have been produced inside the camera.
In one of the photographs, the chemical gel that is released onto the film inside the camera appears to cover part of the unexplained image. Montague Keen claims that this is proof that the image must have been created inside the sealed camera itself.
Bearing in mind that this was A, in the dark, and B, in any case, the camera had the lens totally sealed, and we checked to make sure that no one could have interfered with the seal. But even if they had done, they would have required quite elaborate light and equipment to be able to produce this sort of picture.
The strange events reached an unsettling climax during the third and final experiment. Now in total darkness, the witnesses claimed to have clearly heard and even felt the presence of birds and other wild animals inside the sealed room. Some of the observers even felt the presence of a large snake.
I am terrified of snakes. And even though my logical mind was telling me there wasn't a snake there, I could sense it. And you heard it slithering right up and going up on his lap, and he stroked it. I was so frightened. And I felt ridiculous because I was frightened. And lots of wonderful things happened.
And the most spectacular one was when an owl came in and got caught in the netting. And the noise of the netting you don't actually hear owls screaming, but you hear a very characteristic sound.
There were lots of birds flying around the room, but then they got trapped. I don't know whether you've ever heard a bird who is trapped. It is really very traumatic to hear it. And you feel so bad because you're sitting there and you're not helping it. And we all sat there totally helpless, and yet every one of us were distressed because you felt so helpless. It was struggling, it was caught up in the net, and we couldn't do anything.
By the end of the 3 experiments, a long series of mysterious events had been witnessed by the participants. Montague Keen was now faced with the difficult task of explaining exactly what had caused the strange phenomena.
I don't think we could have absolutely ruled out an elaborate hoax without introducing something like infrared cameras. I think we felt that we had virtually ruled it out by looking at a combination of all of the things that would have had to have been hoaxed. But what made it, I think, impossible was the fact that one of the pictures produced on the second sitting was inherently paranormal, unless someone had managed to get hold of the camera, take it out of the room, remove the cover, have plenty of light, take very careful, precise photographs, put it all back again and bring it back. I mean, this was a scenario which was just simply not feasible. So I think if you take that into account, and then you ask yourself, well, if that is genuine, would all the other things be fraudulent? Would they have gone to the trouble of faking lesser things because they've already got something which is quite clearly paranormal? The answer is no, and no one in their senses would wish to do that.